फर्स्ट हम ये untangled को थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन करेंगे. Untangled means you are not entangled or attached with anything. Okay, स्पिरिचुअली बोल सकते हो या लॉजिकली बोल सकते हो. रिचर्ड रायन एंड एडवर्ड डेसी ने एक थ्योरी दिया था, सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन थ्योरी. वहां पे उन लोगों ने बेसिकली बोला है कि सम पीपल हु आर मोर सेल्फ डिटरमाइंड एंड सम पीपल हु आर नॉट. इसको बेसिकली तीन चीजों के ऊपर they actually put into perspective. One is autonomy, one is competence, and one is relatedness. Autonomy क्या है कि ये एक choice है, feeling a sense of preference, a ownership. Competence है एक mastery, the experience of value or effectiveness into it. And relatedness is the connection, the understanding, the support from others. तो ये तीन चीजें चाहिए to explore the self-determination theory. तो इसको हम अगर थोड़ा एग्जाम्पल देके समझे तो समझ में आएगा. जो सेल्फ डिटरमाइंड है उन लोग मोस्टली क्या होता है, इंट्रिंसिकली ड्रिवन होता है. दे डू देयर वर्क फ्रॉम एंजॉयमेंट, दे डू देयर वर्क फ्रॉम इंटरेस्ट, एंड whatever they are doing they have an inherent satisfaction into it. And if you are working in that mode, then you prefer to admit your fault. You believe whatever problem you are facing, it can be fixable. And you take action for your own mistake. And all these things basically give you high self-motivation. और दूसरा साइड पे आप जब देखोगे, यही काम अगर आप driven by obligation करोगे, driven by forced responsibility करोगे, and you know there is lack of control, you know you cannot influence the whole thing, then automatically you prefer to blame outside world or others. You make excuses and refuse to admit your fault. You will not be motivated as you can imagine, but usse kharab hai, you feel helpless to control your own situation. So whatever you are doing as a businessman, as a leader, if you are operating from the self-determined mode, or trying to make your ecosystem so that you can be self-determined, then you can be more productive. Ramji.
Very interesting concept that you brought in, Gautamji. So self-determination is nothing but swa-vashya. Okay, swa-vashya. Vashya is to be determined. Swa is self. What is the meaning of self-determination? There is a difference between determined and determination. So when you're talking of determination and you're saying self-determination, then obviously it means in what way are you going to be able to take a decision on whatever it is that you want to be doing in life. How do you get to that stage? So you need to go through a process of making that decision. So any decision, self-determination is all about decision making. There is a particular tree that we use to illustrate this. In the world, there is tons and tons and tons and tons of data. Data is everywhere. We live in a data overload kind of a situation right now. But data per se means nothing. Data is just, blocks of stuff. Only when you organize that data into some kind of a method does it become information. Information is something that we can use, and there is a process of, making sure that you organize that data into boxes and put it into some shape, and then you get some amount of information. Now, basis the information, you are now ready to make a decision. So this whole business of self-determination. But you're still a little unsure. You're still not too sure whether this is something which is right, will it work, will it not work, etc., etc. When you work on that information, when you put that information to use, when you challenge that information that's come, when you go deeper into that information, and when you start working with it, when you start experiencing that information, does it become knowledge? Knowledge is nothing but jnana. So when you get to that stage, that's why, there was a lot of emphasis, if you remember, in knowledge workers. Okay, so we need knowledge workers. You need to be knowledgeable about your domain. You need to be knowledgeable about your subject. And that's how this whole subject matter expert, domain expert. What are these domain experts? What are these subject matter experts? They are people who've been able to take data, put it into some kind of a process, make it some amount of information, and they have applied that information, and they are getting some amount of they have that knowledge of doing all of this, and therefore that knowledge is something that can be used to take a particular decision. But the world has moved on, and today when we are doing this data mining, which is nothing but knowledge stripping and figuring out what is the knowledge that is most important, when you take that knowledge and when you have the ability to apply that knowledge to a particular problem and get solution focused, when you approach problems from a solution focus and not from a analysis perspective, then you move into Vijnana, which is wisdom. So today in the world, more and more people are being called upon to become wisdom workers, because they are people who have taken a particular problem and have started, because of their work in this area of Jnana and going beyond Jnana into Vijnana, they are in a position now to figure out how can you become a solution provider. There's a famous statement that we keep saying, are you part of the problem? Are you part of the solution? A information specialist is still struggling with the problem. What is the data? Why is this data revealing this particular problem? He's able to define the problem. A knowledge worker is someone who's able to take that information and classify it into a particular way that will help us take a better decision. But it is the wisdom worker who's looking at the same set of data, the same information, the same knowledge, but is coming from a solution perspective. So what we require in the world is wisdom workers. How do you move from Jnana to Vijnana? And in the Bhagavad Gita, in our Indic knowledge systems, there are beautiful processes available to us, which, if applied very well, can help us move from information, from data to information, information to knowledge, knowledge to wisdom. It is a process that you need to go through. And therefore, it is this wisdom that the world is looking for right now. Let me give you an example, from some of the work that we do. I was recently talking to a jeweler, and there was a customer who was very picky, very choosy, was not satisfied with whatever was being shown, was not also very communicative, except to say that, look, I don't like this, I don't like this. Until this friend of mine, who's this jeweler, how do I train my people to handle such people? So I said, why don't you go and ask them simply, what kind of a person are you? What do you like? What are your tastes like? And they realized, and when he went and he talked to this person and he asked him these questions, out came a very interesting answer. Here was someone who was not worried about the price, but loved simplicity, loved simple lines. And within 5 minutes, instead of showing some chunky jewelry, the entire thing changed, the entire focus changed to simple lines, to elegant lines, and a delighted client. Now, this is wisdom at work. How would you transcend information and the knowledge barrier and move into wisdom? So, we need to get into this process of figuring out how to move from Jnana to Vijnana, because that is then the stage when you become a magnet and people are increasingly coming to you. How do we become wisdom workers? Because that is what the world wants today.
So to go to that wisdom state, definitely then you have to go through few steps like information, then knowledge, then process it and all these things. So that means उसमें भी एक आपको आनंद होना चाहिए to go to that wisdom, and as quickly as we can go to that stage, it's basically we will act more proactively. So Professor Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, उसका एक बहुत famous theory है, which is a flow theory, and in that he says about this peak performance और उसके साथ जो happiness जुड़ा हुआ है. जहाँ पे he said that the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moment usually occur if a person's body and mind is stretched to its limit and accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. तो बेसिकली उसने यही बोला है कि इफ आपका आप जो भी काम कर रहे हो, आपका स्किल लेवल बहुत कम है, मतलब बहुत कम लग रहा है आपका स्किल उस काम के लिए, तो आप जल्दी बोर हो जाओगे. अगर आपका स्किल लेवल बहुत चाहिए जो आप में है नहीं, तो आपको एंजाइटी होगा. और चैलेंजेस भी, अगर आपका बहुत चैलेंज है तो एंजाइटी होगा, अगर एकदम ही चैलेंज नहीं है तो बोरडम आएगा. बीच में जो फेज एक जगह है जहां पे आप ये फ्लो में काम कर सकते हो, जहां पे आप एंगेज्ड हो, जहां पे आप जॉयफुली, फनफुली, ऑर्गेनिकली काम कर रहे हो, जहां पे एंजाइटी नहीं है, वॉरी नहीं है, बोर्डम नहीं है, रिलैक्स, ओनली यू आर एक्टिंग फ्रॉम अ रिलैक्स्ड स्टेट, you can literally float and ride any situation, whatever in front of you.
See, anxiety and boredom are two sides of the same coin. The mistake we make is that we think they are different sides of the same coin. They're actually on the same side of the coin. They're not, it's not anxiety versus boredom. It's not boredom versus anxiety. They both coexist actually. Anxiety and boredom really work together. And they're so close to each other. I'll tell you how. You would have met a lot of people who are constantly saying, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. You're bored of what? You're bored of your own company. I'm not bored of being with Goutam. That means I don't like my own company. I don't like, what is happening in my mind. What is anxiety? Anxiety is nothing but the pressure that I'm putting on myself. It's not external. So both boredom and anxiety coexist in my mind. It is my boredom that leads to anxiety. It's that anxiety that is leading to boredom, which I keep saying it's the same side of the same coin. And the way to come out of that, this flow that you talk about, this flow that you need to get into is what? If you start moving from Jnana to Vijnana, the energy that comes in, the excitement that comes in, the enthusiasm that comes in. The minute you get into solution land, and it now becomes a constant challenge to find that, to find that ideal solution, to find that solution that is going to work. Where is the scope for anxiety and boredom to take shape? So, if you get on to this particular cycle of wanting to become a wisdom worker, and as I said, there is a way to do so. Many of your people want, they can reach out to me, and we have 24 wisdom tools that we use, each of them designed for this. The point with this whole wisdom tool is also this. They all focus on the solution, and they all focus on how to implement the solution. There is a thought. That thought must give you a feeling. The thought is, I will find a solution. What is the feeling that you need? The feeling is that I will crack this challenge, this problem. What is the intention? The intention must get even more solidified that कुछ भी हो जाए मैं इसका हल निकालूंगा या निकालूंगी. And that has to convert into an action, which is implementation. Unless you get into that implementation area, that is where the energy is, that is where the enthusiasm is, that is where you come alive saying, "Arey yaar, chalo kuch karte hain, let us do something now." That is the energy, that is that is the flow. Because the more you keep intellectually trying to, mull over the information or the data that is there, of course you're going to get bored. Of course, you're going to get anxious saying, "Arey, itna data hai, main kya karu iske saath? There's so much of information. How do I cut through and get there. The Bhagavad Gita is 700 shlokas. I don't know what Gautam is going to throw at me this morning. And if I'm going to get stuck in those 700 shlokas, then, obviously I'm going to get anxiety. Obviously I'm going to get bored. We need to get into that implementation aspect. That is the Vijnana. To move from Jnana into Vijnana is the answer.
In the next episode, we will talk about seek meaning and purpose in every action, Karam Yogi. Thanks for watching.